Thank you so much. To my colleague minister, cabinet colleague, the Honorable Obadiah Wilstrom, Minister of Tourism, Member of Parliament for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, to my parliamentary colleague, Tanisha Tynes, to Director General of Tourism, to Mr. John Rowe, Financial Secretary, to Mrs. Sarah St. George, Vice Chairman of the Grand Bahama Port Authority Group of Companies, Mrs. Agatha Marcel, Director of the National Training Agency, Mr. Barry Malcolm, President of the Grand Bahama Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Russell Miller, President of Montelia Limited, to Mr. George Gibbon, Microsoft Country Manager for Bahamas, Belize, Bermuda, the Cayman Islands, and the Turks and Caicos, to Carl Ritter, Chairman and CEO of the Grand Bahama Shipyard, senior government officials, to Mr. Terrence Roberts, our moderator, event sponsors, NGOs, to the Grand Bahama Youth Choir that sang just a minute ago. Please give them a round of applause. To members of the clergy, other distinguished members of the panel, special invited guests, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, and thanks for inviting me once again to the annual Grand Bahama Business Outlook 2014, and for affording me this privilege to bring remarks to many of the key stakeholders on Grand Bahama Island and our out-of-town guests. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my understanding that this year's theme for the 16th Annual Grand Bahama Business Outlook is Charting the Course for Growth in 2014, which I must say coincides with my ministry's motto, which is Charting the Course for a Brighter Future. Ladies and gentlemen, as the world's economies are slowly recovering, charting the course for growth of our national economy is the defining challenge of our time. In fact, ensuring that our local economy works for every Bahamian, driving everything that we do at the Ministry for Grand Bahama, it is also at the very core of this administration's principal objectives and initiatives, which are to strengthen the economy of Grand Bahama, create sustainable jobs, address the social ills in our community, while ultimately improving the overall quality of life for all Bahamians. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenges we face in Grand Bahama are real, and they are numerous, and even though residents and the private sectors endured much over the last 7 years, I do believe that we have much to look for in 2014. The road to recovery is long and difficult, and the challenges we face will not be met easily, but I am convinced from where I sit that we will eventually overcome. Ladies and gentlemen, it is difficult to speak about charting a course for economic growth without discussing the growth of various economic sectors on the island of Grand Bahama. The government of the Bahamas certainly realized the crucial necessity for us to secure our place as a major global competitor and requiring aggressive promotion of Grand Bahama Island in all sectors of the economy, mainly tourism, financial services, industrial and maritime, and they all must work together simultaneously. That is why I'm delighted to see the selected panelists who will cover the relevant aspects of their relative sectors and will hopefully outline much of the technical issues affecting their relevant sector and how it will affect the overall development of our local economy going forward. The reopening of the Reef Hotel as a 4-star all-inclusive resort has definitely jump-started our tourism industry and bred new life into our local economy. The Sunwing Blue Diamond Group and the Ministry of Tourism are promoting Grand Bahama like never before and new untapped areas and markets in Canada, the United States, Europe, and as a result, we have seen increased airlift and stopover visitors, which is expected to steadily grow in the months to come. This influx of visitors to our shore have spurred increased economic activity in the surrounding business district throughout Grand Bahama. I am delighted to share that the feedback received from vendors and business owners and employees in the Port Lucaya marketplace is promising, as many of them are elated about the amount of visitors who are now patronizing their various businesses. Ladies and gentlemen, the benefits of this new resort are far-reaching, as many entrepreneurs and business owners directly and indirectly involved in the hospitality industry are reaping the rewards of our revitalized tourism product. I wish to publicly thank my cabinet colleague, the member for West End and Bimini, the Minister of Tourism and his staff at the Ministry of Tourism for the intricate role they are playing in the resurgence of Grand Bahama Island's tourism industry. Fellow stakeholders, I am pleased to report that local investor confidence on Grand Bahama is on the rise, which is evident with the opening of a number of new small and medium-sized Bahamian-owned businesses in 2013, combined with the hundreds of new sustainable jobs that along with it. The opening of these businesses, as well as the confirmed projects that are on the book for the first half of this year, demonstrates a renewed confidence in the local economy as more and more Grand Bahamians are taking ownership by investing locally. Additionally, in 2013, Grand Bahama Island became home to a few direct foreign investments, which prospects of expansion in the industrial sector has revealed for 2014. Ladies and gentlemen, last week Thursday, I gave remarks at the Stem Cell Society conference held in this same venue, where hundreds of scientists and clinicians and medical practitioners, both local and abroad, and potential investors attended this conference and expressed their interest in setting up research institutions and other medical facilities on Grand Bahama Island once the stem cell legislation is enacted and the regulations pass. This is surely a testament of what is to come for Grand Bahama. Fellow participants, over the last year, my ministry, in conjunction with the Ministry of Health, have been assessing the primary and tertiary healthcare needs for the island of Grand Bahama, and the government is fully committed to the construction of a new state-of-the-art hospital on a 70-acre greenfield site in the city of Freeport. Through a private-public partnership model, this administration intends to improve the present medical infrastructure and the current medical services offered in the Public Hospitals Authority in order to effectively cater to the medical needs of local residents and medical tourists alike on the island of Grand Bahama. Oftentimes, we are tempted to associate good governance solely for what we can see or touch. But we all must be mindful that the state of Grand Bahama economy required much preparation for the way forward. This administration has worked tirelessly over the past 18 months to promote the future development and expansion of economic activity that would result in entrepreneurial and employment opportunities for Bahamians throughout the country, and Grand Bahama is no exception. I am happy to say that my ministry has planted good seed in good ground, and we are presently reaping good reward, as evidenced in the recent labor statistics for Grand Bahama, which confirmed a decrease in unemployment of 2.7% since the last report issued in May 2013. Ladies and gentlemen, the year 2014 is projected to be an exciting year for Grand Bahama Island. My ministry has begun the foundational work to ensure that the government policies and programs are tailored to the specific needs of a resurging Grand Bahama. Therefore, forging ahead, focused attention will be given by my ministry to our legislative agenda and our capital works projects. The extension of duty-free concessions for East and West Grand Bahama. The passing of new environmental protection laws for the city of Freeport and, by extension, the entire Grand Bahama. The commencement of the extensive environmental studies for Pindus Point, Lewis Yard, and the surrounding areas. The negotiation for real property tax exemption with the Hawksbill Creek Agreement, scheduled to expire in summer 2015. The building of the long overdue high school in West Grand Bahama. The construction of a seawall to address the coastal erosion for Smith Point Settlement. The final preparation for the business case for the construction of a new state-of-the-art hospital. The construction of a causeway to replace the present Fishing Hole Road. And finally, the construction of the long-awaited fire station. Fellow participants, as we continue the journey to chartering the course for for economic growth in 2014 and beyond, we realize, as business owners and leaders, many of you may have concerns with regard to the government's economic growth policies. Both the IMF World Economic Outlook in 2014 and the latest report for the Central Bank of the Bahamas show signs of economic recovery, respectively, on a global and domestic scale. Based on these projections, in the midst of this economic momentum, it would be unwise to think, if only for a moment, that this administration would take any action to jeopardize the state of our economy. It is clearly not in the best interest of government, the business community, nor the Bahamian citizenry to implement economic policies that would hinder the growth of our economy and lead to the loss of jobs. In fact, this government will work assiduously to avoid any such digressions. Ladies and gentlemen, I am satisfied that together we all can make our economy significantly better for both Bahamian and non-Bahamian investors. Rest assured, every decision we will make will be in the best interest of this island and, by extension, our country. Finally, in closing, I would like to once again extend warm welcomes to each of you, and I trust that once this conference has come to an end, you will leave here more inspired and will have a more optimistic outlook for Grand Bahama for 2014. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce the keynote speaker. Obadiah Hercules Wilsham was born on November the 4th, 1958 in Freeport, Grand Bahama. He attended Mary Star of the Sea Primary School in Freeport, Queens College in Nassau, that's a good school, the University of the West Indies in Kingston, Jamaica. His career began at the age of 16. He joined the Broadcasting Corporation of the Bahamas and quickly rose to become Deputy Director of News in 1985 and Director in 1987. In 1990, he was appointed Assistant General Manager of the corporation. Minister Wilsham's entire political career has been excellent. In August 1994, he entered politics, and on May the 2nd, 2002, he was elected to the House of Assembly, and as Member of Parliament of West End and Bimini constituency, Prime Minister Perry Gladstone Christie appointed him to his cabinet as Minister of Tourism, with responsibility for the Broadcasting Corporation. In 2012, the Progressive Liberal Party returned to government, and once again, Mr. Wilsham was elected Member of Parliament for West Grand Bahama and Bimini, and subsequently named Minister of Tourism for the second time. I know him. He's hardworking, fully understands his portfolio, remains committed to his constituents and to the island of Grand Bahama, and as a cabinet colleague and Member of Parliament on the same island, we continue to work together with one common goal in mind, and that is to turn our local economy around and bring economic relief for the entire community, including those who are hurting from Sweetens Key to West End. Ladies and gentlemen, please stand with me in welcoming my cabinet colleague to the podium, the Minister for Tourism, the Honorable Obi Wilsham.
Please. Thank you, my colleague and friend, Dr. Michael Darville. And oftentimes in politics, we don't turn to such subjects, but just let me say that several weeks ago, I faced one of the more difficult circumstances in my entire life, when doctors tell you that your mother is very ill and all you can do is pray. And we were in cabinet, and I turned to my colleague and I told him, and he asked the Prime Minister to allow him to leave with me and stayed with me for the next 48 hours. He's a friend and a brother, something I'll never forget. To my friends who have gathered here this morning, my senatorial colleague, Tynes, to the Director General of Tourism, to the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the senior members, to the business community of this island. Let me thank Joan for inviting me to interface and to take advantage of this wonderful opportunity to speak about Grand Bahama. I think all of you know that I'm from here. I'm unashamedly proud of this island, and I make no apologies for my determination to ensure that Grand Bahama receive what it's rightfully due and that it perpetuates and becomes that leading place in our country. And so it's wonderful that we've been able to gather to talk about where we are and where we intend to go. And you would appreciate the difficulty for persons like myself, that every time I come home and I drive past the International Bazaar, it represents for me a change. Because when I was a little boy, whoever thought we wouldn't have it here in Freeport? When I look at some of the faces and I see the change taking place, I fully understand that that is what we are about, change. I understand when I look at my colleague, Dr. Darwell, and he represents a new generation of politics. When I look at Ian Rowland, I remember that, yes, his father used to be in charge of customs. And then I look at Russell Miller, and I remember his father used to be in charge of the Grand Bahama Port Authority. The changes are taking place, and the players are becoming different. And each time you look at the players, you recognize that an opportunity presents itself such as we've ever had before. And so we have this tremendous privilege to make the changes that are required to keep pace with the changing world. And that is why when you consider the fact that we have come from 10 years of a very serious decline in Grand Bahama that began with the hurricanes Wilma, Francis, and Jean, that left Grand Bahama devastated. And soon thereafter, we were facing a recession that many consider to be the worst that the world has ever seen. But truthfully, I look at things as a part of the change required to make the change that will make us better off. I see difficulties as opportunities, and I'm from the school of thought that believes that no glass is half empty, it's always half full. Because I recognize that although the island of Grand Bahama has gone through tremendous pain and suffering, although this island has seen the worst of its life, particularly when you consider that we had families that were broken up. People left the island, had to search for economic opportunities elsewhere. We saw children going without the ability to attend school. We saw mothers crying and asking for help. We saw fathers recognizing the difficulties that they were facing, asking for almost anything just to work, just to put a meal on the table for their children. It was not only the depression caused by the plummeting gross domestic product, but we were also facing what some regard now as the deficit seen in gross national happiness. It affected all of us. And today, as we look to the future, we can see bright hope. I want to remind some of you, and who would know and many of you don't know, that when I talked about Grand Bahama and the possibilities that Grand Bahama could become a tourism mecca, I was told that I was wasting my time and that it couldn't happen, that the focus should be on Nassau and Paradise Island. But I wish to say that the Prime Minister of the Bahamas, the Right Honorable Perry Christie, had this determined view that Grand Bahama can in fact be the #1 tourism spot for our country because it has everything. Grand Bahama and Freeport in particular is still that bestseller no one has told anyone about yet. 60 years next year, and we will be celebrating the Freeport, what happened with Hawksbill Creek. A story that I believe is a story that one day will be a bestseller, because it is a story that speaks of how you turn a pine forest into modernity. How do you take a city, make the infrastructure so modern, but yet we have still not been able to reach that plateau. We've not been able to climb where we ought to be, and as I said, today provides the opportunity, an opportunity that we've never had before, because when you look at the leaders of Grand Bahama, whether it's Godfrey Smith, whether it's Russell Miller, whether it's Ian Roll or Michael Darble or myself, we come from a different generation. And we have a vested interest in this island, more so than ever before. And that is why we can't find complaints. We have to find the answers. We can't look for difficulties. We have to find the opportunities. We can't blame anyone. If we point a finger, we must look at the finger that comes back at us. Because the truth is, we have a chance. We have a chance to put our minds and our thoughts together, our experiences, to make a difference to Grand Bahama. And so I'm very pleased to be here this morning, very pleased to share with you where I think we can go and what we can do and the immediate efforts that can be made to make a difference. And how do we take advantage of the tremendous work done by those who came before, whether it's Edward St. George, Jack Hayward, or Albert Miller. Those who put in place all that we have, and how do we make this city one of the striving cities in the entire world? How does it rank with New York or London? Or how does it become the #1 city in the entire Caribbean? How do we utilize technology to help lift our island and take it forward? And how do we bring in the entire Grand Bahama, east and west, to be a part of this miracle? This is the time, and now provides the opportunity. And that is why when January 16th rolled around this year, I was so very pleased when Sunwing began direct services from 6 Canadian cities, all new business. I was so very pleased when February 1st, Hutchinson Whampoa was able to turn over the new memories to the owners who are now running the facilities, Sunwing. And I'm very pleased that come tomorrow, 370 rooms will be opened, and that facility will be having year-round 80% occupancy. I'm very pleased because we're working with a gentleman by the name of Stephen Hunter, who is a very progressive young man who understands what we're trying to do and who believes that he can help us make a difference, who knows the difference between having 7 nights occupancy for one guest as opposed to 4 nights, who understands that this special formula can work in Grand Bahama like it's never worked before, because he not only brings to the table a brand, a reputable brand, but he also brings the airlift, and he causes for this wide distribution. And so when May 1st comes around, and we have Bahamas Air participating and bringing from 8 cities in the United States, another 14 gateways, bringing to Grand Bahama new business as a part of Vacation Express, also a part of Sunwing. We're going to be causing business to come to Grand Bahama on a year-round basis. And so we will be moving away from that time when we were boom and busting, as opposed to what we're going to be doing now, which will be moving from one step to the next and causing for sustained economic growth, particularly in the tourism sector. And those of us who are involved must understand that we must not only cause for this to work, but we must cause for more inventory. You're not going to be a successful destination unless you have the inventory and the product. The product must be focused heavily on culture, because our surveys show that people come to our country and then they complain that we don't get enough of what is the Bahamas. Our surveys are showing that with Sunwing's involvement here in the Bahamas, more people are taking tours now. More money is being spent on the tours, and more money is being spent outside of the resort, although it's an all-inclusive, because one thing we've learned here in Grand Bahama, also in the capital city, that you might be a part of an all-inclusive, but you don't stay. You spend a day or two and you want to go somewhere else. You want to get the experiences. And that is why product is important. That is why the quality of the service is important. That is why we cannot accept, and we should not accept, that it's okay to be a grade D student. Education is fundamentally important as we move forward, and I'm so very pleased that my colleague Minister Jerome Fitzgerald is now putting in place a standard for high schools. You have to reach a particular grade to get a graduation ceremony in your honor, a ceremony that will cause you to have a diploma, as opposed to what we have now, where people leave school with certifications to say that, well, they passed through. But you have to now get at a particular standard, because we cannot compete with the global community. We cannot compete if we believe that it's okay to be mediocre. And if that's all we want as a people, then why waste your time? What we must understand is that the world is changing. We're no longer sitting on the outside. We're at the table. We're part of the global community. When the ambassador who came to the Bahamas last week sat and looked at the Prime Minister, he said to the Prime Minister that the Bahamas is one of the greatest countries with tourism. He said to the Prime Minister that we're providing you this letter that says that you have endorsed tourism, the concept, the ideals, and that you understand as a resilient industry, and you've utilized it effectively to build a country. And so we want to salute the Bahamas. Well, tourism works, but where are the people? Every industry in our country could work, but the Bahamian people must be the best. We cannot accept that when we travel around the world, it's okay to be number 3 or number 4. And what I find amazing about it, if you look at the leaders of our communities, all of them, look at the leaders of our community, look at the leaders in our parliament, look at the leaders all over this country, and you recognize whether the profession is medicine or law, you realize that our Bahamians have accomplished much. Our Bahamians did very well at school. So why is it that we would accept that we don't and cannot be the best? Well, my argument is that we must be the best. We must be the best. Agatha Marcel is here, and she's leading an institute now causing for the industry to change, all industry in the Bahamas to change. Bahamians must be told that the acceptance of mediocrity is no longer. We want to have the best performance in everything we do. Education must be embraced. Education must be utilized. We must cause our children to understand that we will not be a part of the global community, a competitive country, unless we're able to participate in the opportunities. And the opportunities will come to us if our people are ready to embrace those opportunities. So education and the preparation of our people for the future is fundamentally important in everything we do. And so, Grand Bahama, I ask you, as we look at our schools, as we look at the levels of our education, are we satisfied? I also ask you, are we satisfied that over the last years we've not had schools of the level in Freeport you have them in Freeport, we don't have them in East and West Grand Bahama. And that is why the announcement from the Minister of Education is also very important, because we will build a new high school in West Grand Bahama for the first time since 1967. For the very first time, for the single largest community in the Commonwealth of the Bahamas, for the first time, we're going to build a high school since 1967. And so that is why I argue, how can we have Freeport and we don't have the rest of Grand Bahama? You have to have East and you have to have West. You have to have the entire community. And as we continue to work, we must cause for every Bahamian to understand the story, understand where we've come from, why we're doing what we're doing, and how we're going to make a difference. And if we don't do that, then we will fail in causing our people to move with our progress. And so as the tourism industry begins to move now, we must prepare our people to be a part of the industry. I'm also very pleased that Valeria will begin new service to the Bahamas the end of next month with a larger ship. They will be bringing to our country 900 passengers per day, all intended to come and spend not the day only, but to spend several days. They'll be a part of a fun ship as opposed to what we have now. Again, all intended to bring the numbers, because if Nassau could be doing 26,000 cruise passengers on a big day, could you imagine what we could be doing here in Grand Bahama, or should be doing here in Grand Bahama? There's enough to go around, and we can get much more of the business. Last year, 1.8 billion people traveled in a tourism-related trip around the world. 1.8 billion. The Bahamas did 6.2 million. Now, we don't want a billion people. We can't handle a billion people. We just want more throughout the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. And as Grand Bahama now begins to join Nassau, and it will in just a short period of time, it will become a place with more inventory. It will become a place where we'll have hotels east and west of Grand Bahama. It will become a place that we'll have some commercial activity going on in the tourism industry because we're going to market like we've never marketed before. I spoke to Russell Miller several months ago, and his simple response or his request was that we needed to have a campaign that we can work together on. The Grand Bahama Tourism Board and the Ministry of Tourism. Well, we immediately accepted. And we are now working on creating that ad campaign, the marketing that's required, because we're going to market Grand Bahama to the point where we will never again see the difficulties we've had on this island of Grand Bahama as it relates to tourism. And so I ask all of you to be a partner in what we do, to share our efforts, to make sure that the product is good, to lift up and to cause for the creation of some new restaurants, to bring the nightlife back to Grand Bahama. I remember there was a time when nightlife was everything in this island. Now there's hardly any. We need to have the nightlife. We need to have the activities. Unfortunately, I can't report on the casino yet because we made a mistake on the casinos in the past, the last 2 casinos we've had in Freeport. I'm not satisfied that the casino being presented to us right now as a replacement is the casino that we want for Grand Bahama. We want a top-notch casino. We want a name brand casino. We want a casino just like they have in the capital city, where when you hear the name, you want to come because you know the business is going to be exceptional. And unless we could do that, then why would we take this shortcut? We can stick with what we have now for a longer period of time before we introduce something that does not make sense for the growth of Grand Bahama Island. So ladies and gentlemen, don't expect that announcement today because it's not going to happen today because we're not ready yet. But what I can tell you, though, is that what we're doing to bring business to Grand Bahama so far is showing good dividends. It's showing that business is growing. It's showing that people are participating. It's showing that our island's economy is growing tremendously. And so, Dr. Darvel, please let me tell you that, yes, the indicators are showing, but we have to hold and we have to continue to work because we've gone a long time without anything happening in Grand Bahama. And that is why the government of the Bahamas, ladies and gentlemen, will not stop any growth. The government of the Bahamas will be a participant in causing for sustained economic growth. And I've heard all the debate in the public about the taxes that were proposed by the Ministry of Finance. And I'm not talking about the VAT, that's another subject. I'm talking about the taxes for services. The truth is, I spoke with the Prime Minister this weekend. He's advised me that following discussions with the Grand Bahama Port Authority and also discussions with Hutchison Whampoa, those taxes are now being reviewed. And so, therefore, we expect some changes because we're not going to stop the growth and the development of Freeport Grand Bahama. Similarly, our Director General of Tourism will be sitting down today with Hutchison to talk about the taxes at the airport here in Freeport. It is not acceptable, and I understand maybe the circumstances, but it's not acceptable that our taxes here for turnaround and fuel are 126% higher than any taxes in the entire Caribbean. That's not competitive. We got to be competitive. We got to understand what we're up against, and you can't be 126% higher for turnaround and for fuel than the entire Caribbean. In fact, even higher than the capital city of the Bahamas. So we have to do what we can to bring those numbers down because we can't compete. We were in a discussion last week talking about small island developing states. Truth is, Grand Bahama can be a hub. Grand Bahama could be a hub for travel. Grand Bahama could be a hub for trade. It has the modernity. It has everything. It's sitting right here. We could be the trading zone between the east and the west and the north and the south. Things that we could do, but you have to be competitive. And that is why, as the Bahamas government looks at the taxes, well, we asked Hutchison Whampoa and the Grand Bahama Port Authority also to look at some of the taxes that are being charged now because those taxes will push us out of the game. I also ask you to look at what happens in the western end of this island. Now, I am the Member of Parliament for West Grand Bahama, and you would appreciate that I do have a severe determination to ensure that those communities begin to improve. I cannot accept that those communities will always be striving and fighting and not getting the same opportunities. And so I'm hoping that beginning January 1st next year, that every business owner in West Grand Bahama gets the same opportunity and the same exemptions that the business owners get here in Freeport. I believe that it can cause for growth. I believe that it can cause Grand Bahama to grow significantly, and it can cause some equity. And so if we believe in the doctrine of equity, certainly we believe that we should provide the same opportunity similarly. I am very concerned that in West Grand Bahama, why is it that the infrastructure for lights and water are not being put in when we're paying the Grand Bahama Port Authority and you're charging the people of West Grand Bahama or the Freeport Power Company? Truth is, why should we be allowing that to continue to happen? And no one can tell me that it doesn't happen, because I know it does. I can tell you about my own situation when I went to Seagrape and I said, listen, how come we have no lights here on Grays Lane, the back street in Seagrape? We had none. I called and asked whether or not you put them in. They told me, no, you put in the infrastructure, we'll provide the lights. So I had to find the money. So John Martin and myself had to come up with the money. We had to pay. And that's the situation still in in West Grand Bahama, where people have to pay to get the infrastructure for water and the infrastructure for electricity. And I'm talking about infrastructure that's on the streets. That's not fair, and that's not correct, and we have to fix that, because if we're going to cause for growth in this island, then people ought to be allowed to live with the decency as everyone else. Because if you're providing the services, you're being paid for the services, and I know what you do in Freeport. I grew up in Freeport, but I'm asking you to please give consideration to people in East and West Grand Bahama, because if we don't, then of course you'll never see the growth as I believe the growth can come. Because as the minister announced that we're going to put a new school in the western end of the island, the minister responsible for national insurance has also assured me last evening, that the new administration building for West Grand Bahama will also be constructed during the next 12, 13 months. Again, as a part of causing for a renewal of the communities in those particular areas. And then, why can we not have other opportunities provided? Why can't we look at what we should be doing with the shipyard? Why can't the government and the company, and I think they're doing a wonderful job, the company is, but we should cause for a program to be established with BTVI that we will see triple the number of Bahamians graduating from the shipyard. Because right now we're still having a large number of individuals brought in to work at the shipyard, and that shipyard can provide tremendous opportunities. I met with the president of Disney this week, and he told me next year 2 of their vessels will be here on dry dock. Well, the business will continue to grow. And again, it comes back to the simple argument that I have. Why can't we be the best in the world in everything we do? And why can't we cause all the business to want to come to Grand Bahama? Because we are competitive. We can be that if we have the talent. If we utilize and prepare our people at the end of the day, then we can take advantage of it. I think it's a wonderful idea that you brought someone in to discuss the technology, because Grand Bahama can be a data processing place. Why can't it be? It can be one of those places where Visa and MasterCard and American Express would want to come and set up their businesses and cause for data processing. It's taking place in other parts of the world. Why not here? Why not right here in Grand Bahama? You have it all here. And we can do it on this island if we take the opportunity. But we've got to go out, we've got to reach out. I found it very interesting. I was reading The Economist magazine just recently, and I saw a story about a Freeport. I thought they was talking about this Freeport. But they weren't talking about this Freeport. They were talking about the Freeport that now exists in Malaysia, a Freeport that now exists in Liechtenstein, a Freeport that now exists in other parts of the Middle East and elsewhere. And that Freeport is intended to do one thing. It has similar regime as you do. But what's intended to do is cause for individuals who own wealth and who own art to be able to, under the radar, be able to store their art and their wealth. And it's working. It's an industry that's growing. Well, why isn't Freeport out there talking about the same thing to those same people? And why aren't we talking to some of the people in the Bahamas right now, who are investing in similar places and doing the same thing that we could do here in Freeport? Opportunities are here, and we're going to have to one day accept that the Hawkesbury Creek Agreement in 1955 was one of the best things that ever happened. We're going to have to accept that it could have been a start of something that we have paid little or no attention to, but in fact, it's going to be something that people look at in years to come and see how brilliant it was. And we're going to have to accept that it was someone coming up with an idea that made a lot of sense at a time when many weren't even thinking. It's a brilliant idea. Now the question is, how do we take advantage of it in this new world order? Not 20 years ago. In fact, everything's in place now. In fact, if you remember, it started off talking about the Deepwater Harbor. That didn't happen immediately. It just happened 10, 15 years ago. But the truth is, it is the thing. It's what people want. It's what we're talking about every single day. So just imagine the things that we could do here in Grand Bahama. And I also want you to know that the Ministry of Tourism is not going to be left out. We're not going to be left out in causing new things to happen. One of the things that I want to see next year are 2 signature events for Grand Bahama. One being, and associated with, I want to have a marathon, an international marathon, where we'll be providing top prize money, but the international marathon to be named in honor of Errol Bodie, an international marathon that will begin in East End and finish at the Ramfully Circus. Now you may ask me why. I remember when I was a little boy and running at Mary Star at the C School, he started the marathons. He's passed on. But how to remember a great man who did a lot in the United States as well? We could do things by causing that race to become one of the events on the global calendar for those persons who participate. And equally, we're going to have a bicycle race that will start in East End and finish in West End. That's a straight run. Again, lots of money to be spent, lots of money to be made. But it will cause for greater promotions for the Bahamas. I'm also going to introduce a Bahamas Caribbean Film Festival here in Grand Bahama. We don't have one in the Bahamas. There's none in the Caribbean, but a Bahamas Film Festival intended to ensure that Grand Bahama sees its potential of becoming a film capital in the Caribbean. And we're going to ask Rick Fox to serve as a patron of it, because we're going to reach out around the world to bring some of the top producers to this island. When Johnny Depp came here for Pirates of the Caribbean, I remember him telling me it's one of the best places he's ever been. It is. It's the best place for film. It's the best place for doing a lot of things, certainly business. But if we put in place the incentives and the legislation, if we work with the Grand Bahama Port Authority and the Hutchinson Whampoa, the truth is it will make sense to come here to shoot films, because we can cause persons to be able to have rebates on what they do here in the Bahamas and feel them, whether it's in the UK or in the United States of America, in New Zealand or Australia. Legislation could be put in place and can make a difference. And so we're going to cause that to happen. It's going to make a difference as we bring changes to this island of Grand Bahama. And so, ladies and gentlemen, needless to say, I'm very pleased with where we are. I'm very pleased about where we are with tourism. I'm very pleased that we've taken that giant step, but I'm not yet happy. I'm not yet happy because it has to be sustained. I'm not yet happy because we don't have all our Bahamian people prepared to work in the industry. I'm not yet happy because we haven't made the headlines all over the world as being the #1 industry again. And to get there, that means we have to work together. But we should all know that we're coming out of a very difficult time. And that difficult time has caused many to stop and think. Many left this island. Many went other places looking for opportunities. Many are coming back home now. But we have to cause for Grand Bahama Island to become one of the more successful places in the entire world. And as I've said before, those of us who sit at the table today, we have no excuses. We have no excuses. We cannot find any faults with anyone because we're the ones there. We're the ones who are charged with the responsibility. And those of us who have that responsibility must take it seriously. Because if we take it seriously enough, if we begin to sit and we begin to plan, if we talk again about a future, if we're serious about charting a course for tomorrow, that means that the government representatives, that means that the Port Authority, that means that Hutchinson Whampoa must sit down, must begin to work together about 2015 and beyond. If we're going to extend the concessions, let's extend them. If we're going to allow it to live on, let it live on. But let it live on in the interest of the entire island of Grand Bahama. Let's ensure that we can make Grand Bahama successful again. Now, I know Brother Roll is coming to talk to you about that. And that's a subject that everyone's talking about. It's going to be one of those interesting subjects that I believe will get a tremendous amount of debate in this country. I don't usually talk about that because I had a bad experience with that. I remember when I went to Long Island for the first time campaigning, and I didn't know any better. I was sitting in the car, and I just figured I'd go out and see what I could do. And I walked out of the car and I went over to somebody and I said, are you going to vote for the PLP this time? The gentleman looked at me and nodded his head, and I was feeling good about myself. He said, I'm going to vote for the PLP when VAT 19 turns 20. So I've never forgotten that. So I stay away from the VAT discussions. Ladies and gentlemen, you have a wonderful day ahead of you. You have some wonderful speakers, some individuals who will make a difference in what we do. I ask all of you to understand that we're on a mission. We're on a mission to make a difference. I'm asking all of you, let's work together. I'm looking forward to the team that Grand Bahama has and that God has allowed to evolve. A team that could certainly change the way we do things in the Bahamas and the way we do things in Grand Bahama. Team that can cause Grand Bahama to be one of the more successful places in the entire world, not only the Bahamas, but the entire world. And I look forward to working with all of you over the next several months. Tourism will be pushing ahead with our wonderful team in Grand Bahama. And if you may, please give Betty Bethel a round of applause for the work that she's been doing. We have a wonderful team of young Bahamians who are committed to making a difference. And we can cause for growth, domestic happiness, but more so, I believe if we do that, then our gross domestic product will also be extremely good. And that is fundamentally what our responsibilities are all about. Thank you very much. I wish you well. And let's enjoy planning the future. And let's all head on the same course and chart a great future for Grand Bahama and the Commonwealth of the Bahamas. Thank you. Questions? Yes, sir. I can see you. Oh.
Questions, because what we want in Grand Bahama is real answers. We're tired of the bull, really. We need real answers. Most of us Grand Bahamians are not interested in moving anywhere. We don't want to move to Nassau. We don't want to move to Abaco. We want to stay right here, and we want to see the turnaround in our lifetime. I'm almost 50 years old. I want to see the turnaround before I get 60 or 65 years old. I believe it can happen. I have 3 questions for you. Number one, this proposal that Mr. Kenneth Russell had under the F&M, now under the PLP, is targeted to transform the island, the country. Everybody in Grand Bahama is saying, why don't the government sign off on this if it is so good for the country?
Where's the money?
Can you address that?
Where's the money? I think you're asking a question. I think
I don't know.
If the project, I don't think you know all the details of the project.
Yeah.
I think you have to appreciate the project requires a lot of crown land, and the project requires a lot of money, billions of dollars. No one's getting in the way of the project. In fact, the Prime Minister has embraced Mr. Ken Russell and worked with him. In fact, we flew from the United Arab Emirates to New York to meet with Mr. Ken Russell and his team. So it's continuing. I think the question you're really asking is whether or not we're going to have great inventory and we're going to see the East and the West grow. The answer is yes. I don't want to talk about new inventory. I can, but I won't now because I've learned in politics you don't talk it until it's there. We're in major discussions right now for West End. We're in major discussions for Freeport. And we will, at the appropriate time, talk about it. It's just like this project with Memories. We didn't talk much about that. We didn't want to because the difficulty is you have to slowly make it happen. We're not in politics or in office just to waste time. We're in office to make a difference in people's lives. And I believe that you should be satisfied to know whether it's Mr. Ken Russell or anybody else. Any proposal gets ample hearing. And when it makes sense, we push it and we work with the investors. Mr. Ken Russell has been working with us. He's a colleague. And certainly we are hoping that it all works out. But he's not been pushed aside, so we're waiting for them, and the ball's in their court. But insofar as other inventory is concerned, yes, inventory is we're going to have more inventory in Freeport. We're going to have more inventory in West Grand Bahama. I personally believe that we have to have a total room count of about 10,000 over the next 3-4 years if we're going to be competitive. And then we have to cause critical mass to move into Grand Bahama. You don't have enough people. So how are you going to make this thing work? You need more people on this island of Grand Bahama. So certain things got to draw them in.
Okay, thank you. You said you don't like to talk about VAT, but we wanted to know from the government's perspective, is VAT going to happen for Grand Bahama, or is Grand Bahama going to be exempt?
We're not sure if that's going to happen for the Bahamas yet. I mean, the truth is, Mr. Rolls here to continue to talk about and to cause for the education. But you know what's interesting in Freeport? Freeport is the only place really with taxes. Freeport. And that's why I said we're going to have to look at the model of Freeport and whether or not the model of Freeport makes a lot of sense. You have a service charge, which you pay every year, which makes sense, because it costs for your roads and everything else to be maintained. And then you have a garbage tax that you pay on your water bill. Well, that makes sense too, because you pick up your garbage and everything else is cool, and it calls for the smooth running of governance. Well, we don't do certain of those things in the other parts of the Bahamas. Well, should we be talking to the government, or should the government be talking to the port? Should we be looking at the model? That's why I think it's important to have dialogue. And should we be looking at the model that you've adopted here in Grand Bahama, that you and I grew up with, and to see whether or not it's workable for the entire island of Grand Bahama, and should parts of it be used in the Bahamas, and can it be utilized? And then I think we could arrive at a model that's workable. You know, when I used to spend time with Sir Lyndon Pinley, and you'd appreciate that he taught me everything I know about politics. One of the things he said was there's no single economy that you can adopt, no single approach. You must, in a developing country, look at all the countries around you, whether it's Liechtenstein or Barbados or Bermuda, and from them all you will find things that could work in your destination that you might wish to include in your destination. And once you're able to do that, then you could just literally introduce new programs that make sense. VAT has worked and utilized by a significant number of countries. We're discussing it right now. We are still discussing it at the cabinet level. And Mr. Rolls here to talk to you about it. He's an authority on it. He understands. And so I think the debate is still out there. But at the end of the day, the government has to find new revenue. Now, the question is, how could we find new revenue? How do we do that? Now, I personally believe we can. I personally believe that we can find new ways to create, new ways to cause greater spend in the Bahamas, new ways for the government to raise more money. But the debate is still on, so I can't answer that.
Lastly, we have a lot of expatriate jobs in Grand Bahama. I know Minister Mitchell, just after the election, was doing some work down on with some of the industrial companies. I'm wondering how that is going because, of course, you know, we live here and you can see people from other places dress, go into work, and then our brothers are home, are playing dominoes. What's happening with
that? You appreciate that I have a difficulty with that too. And you have to understand why I have the difficulty. I have the difficulty because I believe that in a country with 300,000 people is too small a country to be talking about unemployment numbers, the numbers we have. That's a small business in most parts of the world. But our people, are we prepared? Are we ready? See, one of the problems we have is, and I think all of us have to accept responsibility. You can't let children go to school and come home and you know they're failing and accept it. Because when they get to the workplace, then that's the real problem, because how could you expect someone, Bahamian or foreign, to invest their money, and after they invest their money, you're going to tell them you can put anybody there? That's not going to work. And that's why Agatha Marcel is fundamentally important as to where we're going. But all of us have to understand that we have to get our people ready. You know, I had a situation just recently where one of my friends called me looking for a job. I said, you know, it's better off me paying you every week. Because truth is, you want me to find you a job because of my political involvement. But the truth is, can you truly contribute to what we need to have done? I think if we can get Bahamians to stop, we can't win a gold medal at Olympics if we're mediocre. Well, how do we win the gold medal? We have to be the best. How did Michael Thompson and Rick Fox make it to the NBA? They had to be the best. Well, why can't we begin to think that way? Why can't we begin to say, well, we won a Grammy Award in music, we won Olympics, we had the professional basketball players, we had professional baseball players. That means that we can be the best, that we do have the capacity. Well, why can't we ensure that all of our people understand? Why can't we make that a new song in the Bahamas where we're looking for the best? We're not settling for mediocrity. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. And I believe that as we are looking at the people who are in Grand Bahama now working, we must look at those areas and then begin an extensive training program and ensure that we push to get the best out of it. So the issue is an issue that we have to address, but at the same time we have to ensure that the quality of the laborer or the Bahamian looking for the job is the best. You know, I think people get Bahamianization mixed up sometimes too. I read recently A.D. Hanna's position on Bahamianization, and what he said was, once the Bahamian has prepared himself and is qualified, he should get the job. Right? It wasn't just based on, I was born in the Bahamas. It has to be based on being prepared, being the best at what you do, fighting, ensuring. We just brought in some people at the Ministry of Tourism. I can tell you, you look at their qualifications, you're like, whoa, these are Bahamians, but a significant number of them. Some we brought in from other places, other parts of the world to get into the Ministry of Tourism. Why? Well, how we can compete with the world if we can't be the best? You can't compete if you're not going to have the best people. So to compete, you see our Director General, these guys aren't slouches. These are real bright men, and they can compete with anybody in the world. And when you sit around tables with them, you recognize that we're there. But that should be consistent. And whatever we do, if you're picking up garbage, you should be the best garbage picker. I'm serious, because you have to make sure that we're doing it and we're at the best levels. Ma'am.
Mr. Minister, good morning. My name is Lily Strawn Moxie, and I stand here today representing the Bahamas National Craft Association.
Yes.
My question to you is, what futuristic plans do you have for craft on Grand Bahama as well as other islands of the Bahamas? I'll sit and wait for your answer.
Okay. That's a very good question. And I can tell you, we just 2 nights ago, I had to go to Cancun, Mexico for a meeting and turn right around and come back. But walking through the airport yesterday, one of the things that I paid attention to was the craft work. And I saw that they had a whole lounge just for craft work. When we went to South Africa recently, the Prime Minister invited me to join him on the memorial for Nelson Mandela. On the way back, we were escorted through their craft center at the airport again. And they told me at the time I asked the question, how busy is this? They said this is the busiest area of the airport because everybody wants a piece of South Africa to take back home. Well, the same applies here, but you have to remember, we have to change the thought process too. In fact, in Nassau right now, we're having a discussion at Festival Place because we've had hair braiders, for instance. But why do we have hair braiders just sitting on hard conch shell or hard seats? They don't have places to sit. They don't have chairs for people to be in to get their hair done. Well, what we did was satisfy a political desire, but we did not think about the industry at all. And so we're going to create now at Festival Place, another couple of months, you're going to see the Braiders Salon because it makes more sense. You fix it, people are going to come in. Why would you think the visitor want to go in that place to get their hair fixed? They don't want to go there and get their hair fixed. So we have to take the straw. We have to take the craftspeople. We have to put them in areas and create for them opportunities. One of the things that taxi drivers in Nassau have been complaining about is that we have business, but we don't get some of the business. Well, true, because if you're going to walk on Bay Street, if you're going to walk and take the boat and go to Paradise Island, and they don't have any business, then how are we winning here? Well, what we're doing is we're creating places. Clifton, for instance, in another month or two, you're going to hear the Clifton show. Every day there'll be shows at Clifton. Shows where you have Bahamian dancers and all the rest, and artists and others are going to be there because we're driving people to these areas. And throughout the Bahamas, we have to find places to put the craft centers. In Grand Bahama needs a craft center, but it has to be a part of that tour. That tour that Stephen Hunter, the president and CEO of Sunring, was talking about. He said that we could still use an additional 10 tours in Grand Bahama. Well, one of them will be for the craft centers. One of them will be to get Bahamians and for Bahamians to have opportunities because let's think about it. What does the Bible tell you? That your gifts open doors for you? Well, that's your gift. Now, we have to understand that, because I think that what has gone wrong with us sometimes, we deal with one side and we forget the other. For tourism to work, and tourism works in any part of the world when the Bahamian people are involved, or when the people are involved. And in our case, it's the Bahamian people, and they must have more opportunities. So we're going to be coming back to you very soon to talk about that and to meet with you and to talk about the place that we want to have for everybody.